Welcome to Pique Your Interest, your go-to podcast for all things mortgage and real estate. Hosted by Tanner Greenwald and Tim Malaskis. We bring you expert insights to help you buy, sell, and invest with confidence. Let's dive in.
Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Tim, and I have a very special guest here today from Eagle Title, Brad Walsh. Brad, thanks for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, man.
But people prioritize what they want and how it's going to make them feel. I think it's a bigger picture game that we as a country have to get better at our spending habits and financial literacy, because that moves the needle way more at the end of the day.
Yeah. No, I think you're right there. I think that there's definitely, if you talk about the things that kids don't learn in school, right? You talk about you don't learn financial literacy, you don't learn about credit. I mean, credit is a huge part of everyone's life once you hit 18 years old, and no one talks about it.
I didn't understand credit until my identity was stolen twice. And then after you have to rebuild after 2 identity thefts, you learn a lot about what moves the needle in credit. And most people they wouldn't. It's some of the stuff that's there doesn't even make sense, frankly. You pay off debt and your numbers go down in some cases, right? Because when I started paying off my student loans, like my credit score was just getting killed. And I'm like, wait, hold on. I'm doing the smart, responsible thing here, paying off debt, and yet you're knocking me over here because my life of credit went down because these things, came off the books after 13 years. Yeah. Like, it's nonsensical to a layperson, but the more you understand that, there is some gaming the system that you can do if you really want to. And I think that's why people need to meet with mortgage individuals like yourself who can really be talking them through that, not when they're trying to compete for a loan today.
Right.
You need to be looking a year out and really understand what are a couple of these things I can toy around with that make me look a lot better. I either need to add some credit facilities, remove some credit facilities, but give it some time to age, because you can really crank it up now more. Now, I don't know with what's going on with what they're doing with the credit reporting stuff and some of
the Vantage score and stuff like that.
The Vantage score. I don't know how that's going to play into it, but I think I would imagine at some level there's ways to game the system a little bit and improve it for better rates and that sort of thing.
Yeah. I mean, as much as people rip on millennials, and me being one of them sometimes, one of the things that 2008, in my opinion, one of the things that 2008 created was a more financially responsible generation, right? Because you saw your parents or an aunt or an uncle or somebody else that you knew lose their house, lose their livelihood, and you made a decision, most likely subconsciously, I never want that to happen to me.
100%.
And the steps that people take, the things that they do now, going back to technology is so much more prevalent now. Information out there is so much better than it used to be. You have the ability to do some research in advance. You have the ability to figure out, what do I need to do to make myself more financially responsible than, say, my parents who were foreclosed on, or whatever the case is. And I think that there's a lot of good info out there. There's a chasm where people want that info. They want to be, sort of guided along that journey, and I think that there's a craving for that, and I get more people talking to me, more young people that are under 40 years old, asking about, how do I build my credit, how much money do I need to save, whereas 15 years ago, or I guess at this point it's probably 17 or 18 years ago, the conversations weren't about that. It was, how big of a house can I buy? Now it's, how can I prepare myself to buy? And I think, although 2008 was awful, I never want to see it again, it created an entire generation of people who want to do better than the previous generation, and I think that's awesome.
I think it was a reset for our country. Yeah. And, I think you're right, because there's a lot of millennials that I find, millennials got a bad rap. I still think millennials are one of the, and I'm I'm at the top end of the millennial, so I'm more of a Zennial, Oregon Trail type generation personally.
Okay.
But I like it because it was the last generation where you could still learn to talk to people and not just send them a text message or an email and expect that was an acceptable form of human interaction.
Right.
But you still be technologically savvy enough to really understand that that's a big part of our life.
Right.
I feel like millennials got a bad rap, though. But you're right. There's this societal moment where they lived through it. They felt that pain. They saw it, to your point, people losing their houses, their jobs, and they're much more protective of their finances. They're much more. Now, they may not have the wealth yet because we didn't have the job growth and we didn't have the wage growth over the last 15 to 20 years that they've had in some prior generations. But you're actually starting to see their wealth explode right now, and I think it's because they are better financial managers at this point because they have a game plan.
Yeah,
they know where they want to go. They have their eye on retirement. Not they're not 55 starting to eye retirement.
Right.
They're looking at 35 and 40, saying, "What do I need to do to be financially responsible to hit my life?
Right.
When do I want to walk out the door? Not when is someone pushing me out the door." Because I'm going to do it on my terms.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So,
yeah,
it's interesting. Yeah, we've also seen another shift recently, which is the market has just shifted on a dime.
Yeah, no kidding. For a long time we were in a seller's market, right? Like there was no doubt that we were in a seller's market and that sellers had all of the power in real estate. It's still a seller's market in some places, but I think it could be shifting.
Yeah, I attested to, it's not this gradual transition that we'd previously seen through going from a buyer's market to a seller's market or vice versa. This is an abrupt shift. It reminds me of if you ever learned how to drive a stick shift, and the first time you tried to change, get it into gear, and you almost hit your head on the windshield because you're that's what it feels like to me. Now, your point is excellent. There are still some markets where it is a seller's market. There's these pockets of communities that are still in high demand, and you have that. But you're not necessarily seeing. I mean, I remember during COVID when they were having videos of people doing open houses where there was 5-minute slots with 100 people wrapped around the corner trying to get in for a 5-minute window.
Yep.
That doesn't exist anymore.
No,
you're seeing
God.
a lot more of these homes sit on the market longer, and I think some of it's not as much rate driven because the rates are still high, but they're not near where they were in the 7s and 8s that we had a couple years ago. So it's bad, or it's not bad. It's historically, we're at the same place that we maybe a little bit elevated. You can go down that avenue. But the interesting part to it is because it's happening so abruptly, the consumers have to change, and they're not changing quickly enough.
Right.
The agents have to change. The lenders have to change. Everyone has to understand what's going on in front of them, and the fact that this is not a slow transition anymore. It's like, the market just slid down the bat pole, and Batman flying out with his cape on. Now, it changed over the scope of a blink, which has people on their heels a little bit because I think sellers still have these wild expectations of I'm going to put my home on the market and I'm going to go out of town for the weekend, and I will be keeping my phone on so that I can hear all these amazing offers of $50,000 over ask, and no concessions and no inspections, and I'll have this thing tidied up by Monday and I can come home and I'll be closing in 2 weeks. That world has largely disappeared.
Correct.
Both in the high end, the middle, and the low.
Yeah.
And now people are having to do some things they hadn't done in a while. We're seeing seller credits in a big way, and I'm not talking like a couple bucks.
Yeah.
There's some real numbers that are being thrown around because it's coming out of either the affordability. I mean, I haven't seen this many VA loans and FHA loans over the last 6 to 8 months. I haven't seen as many we've done over that time period as we did in the preceding 5 years.
Yeah.
Because they just weren't competitive in that market. You just couldn't, if boomers are coming in slinging cash and first-time home buyers trying to get in with an FHA and, they got nothing really to show.
Right.
Can you get that appraisal up there? It's going to be tough. And they don't have the ability to throw in an appraisal gap and really leverage that. Now, there are some positives. Yeah. Got some first-timers coming out, some people that don't necessarily have all the cash to get there. You got some veterans being more competitive on properties. I mean, I saw a lot of people during that era who wanted a VA loan, couldn't really get it accepted, so they wound up writing a conventional and then 6 months later refinancing into a VA to get themselves back into it, which that was unfortunate for them. You don't want to see them be disadvantaged by it, but certain loan programs in certain situations, they're not all equal in how they look to the seller in that situation.
Correct. I mean, we could go down the road of, here's why you should not look at as, an FHA loan or a VA loan as lesser than a conventional loan. But suffice to say, the general feeling out there is that, if you've got a conventional loan versus any other loan type, that conventional loan is going to win almost every time in a multiple offer situation. We're not there anymore, which is nice. There's a lot more government business being done.
Yeah, I mean, I think people are definitely having the ability to compete more with these government loans, which is great. I think the part that is difficult, though, because the seller's expectations are still out of whack, they're not seeing the reality of what their transaction is going to look like. And they still have these grandiose plans. Even if the agent's doing a good job of preparing them, they're always 6 to 8 months behind of what the media is telling them, what they're hearing. And I think the flip side of that is a lot of the agents kind of lost their fastball in some ways when it comes to doing the negotiations of a property inspection notice or a PIN, or really trying to figure out what is going to get it over. I mean, we saw our highest cancellation rate last month of any month in the last 7 years.
Yeah.
I think the Redfin posted last month nationally it was a 15% cancellation.
I was going to bring that up. I read that same article.
65,000 cancellations.
That is nuts.
Because before it was like, people are like, they'd be like, all right, I got this awesome house. I know it doesn't really, it's got some holes in the roof, but
I didn't get a home inspection, so I have no idea what's wrong with it, but I got it.
And that you bring up another point, like the ability to have home inspections again.
Massive for buyers.
Yeah. And I cannot tell you how many people I got calls from. I was averaging somewhere between 4 to 7 a week of consumers that were calling me from 2020 to 2024 being like, I'd like to sue the seller. I'm like, okay, well, what would you like to sue them for? And they're like, well, they didn't disclose this. I'm like, well, let's start with, did you do a home inspection? Well, no, I couldn't. Couldn't's a tough term there.
Right.
That you gave up your ability to do that or your negotiated opportunity to do that because you thought that's what was necessary. And in some cases it was, but you start losing yourself some legal footing of that recourse against it. And that's where I think a lot of first-time homebuyers really got themselves put in a bad situation. And when I say this, I don't know that the sellers were actually doing anything nefarious. We all know if you've seen a home inspection report, I don't care what house is out there. It could be even new construction homes. Their home inspection reports are not
clean at all.
Not clean at all.
Yeah.
But the problem is if you didn't have the ability to see a home inspection report and then be like, okay, I'm buying this, but even though I know there's these issues that are hanging out there. So the problem is now first-time home buyers waiving inspections. They've never owned a home before. They don't understand that these things aren't, you're not buying a brand new car. Yeah. There's some things that are going to be wrong with it. The floors are going to squeak a little bit. Maybe the downspouts aren't done right, or what, there could be some roof leaks, there could be some HVAC issues, there could be these things that aren't necessarily latent defects, but just part of home ownership.
Yes.
And then they want their pound of flesh, and I'm like, but you're gonna have to pay for that pound of flesh, and you may not be able to recover. There's a lot of ways that you can go down that, but it was a tough conversation for him, and I think a lot of it was just the guidance, and it wasn't that they were getting bad guidance. It was just that was the market.
That's what you had to do. It was what was
just
necessary.
Unfortunate.
But maybe we see that, that lock-in effect that we've talked about, maybe that's not as strong with some of the people that bought in 2020, 2021, 2022, when they were waiving home inspections like crazy, because now you've lived there and you're like, you know what? I know all the things wrong with this house. And instead of being like your dad, who's like, I know what's wrong with this house, I'm going to keep it. It's, I know what's wrong with this house. Now I want to sell it and get into the next house because, I want to buy in a market that's a little more favorable for buyers. I want to be able to have a home inspection. I want to, upgrade or downgrade or whatever it is by choice, not out of feeling like I was forced to do it during 2020 and 2021.
But you think about it, because we've had the lowest amount of foreclosures in history, we're missing a whole section of inventory from foreclosures, right? We're missing some of this inventory that's out there. Now, fortunately, we actually are about at the moment right now where we've reached pre-pandemic levels of inventory, which is good.
Yeah.
Now, even pre-pandemic, we were at some of the lowest levels of inventory in history, so it's not like great, but we're on that trend.
Yes.
And I think that there's some really positive stuff that goes with that. People have some choices. It's not like, hey, there's this one home in this one community that in the zip code that you want to be in.
Right.
Would you like to offer 20% above ask for it, or what do you want to do here?
Yeah.
So there's some positivity around that.
All right. Well, Brad, thanks for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure, man. It's been great. So, guys, Brad Walsh, Eagle Title, if all your title needs. And again, I'm Tim at First Home. If there's anything I can do to help you, Brad and I are just a call away. We'll see you next time.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.